let's make something out of this. I need a C table. So this is my selection. Quite a bit of ash. That's pretty common in these parts. I do got some cherry. I'm not sure what this is. I have a bark identification book, and it may be a young bitternut hickory, but I'm not positive. But the next thing to do is just start breaking it down, making it into squares before I make it into boards. Alright, so after a lot of milling, this is what I am left with so far. I have a very solid amount of ash, which I'm going to be building the legs and body of the table out of. It might be more than one kind of ash here. I'm not positive. I mean, I'm truly not an expert at identifying based on bark, but this is all ash. It could be white ash, black ash, green ash. I'm pretty sure it's white ash, but I'm not positive. But a lot of ash and a good amount of cherry. And some decent pieces of cherry as well. It's always a lovely wood. It smells great when you cut it. This piece is very nice. This is a really nice big block of cherry. So the top of the table will be cherry. And won't be that complicated to make the top. I'm just gonna settle on a thickness, cut them to length, glue them together. The body is where it's going to get interesting because these are short, probably 16 inches long at the most, the ash pieces are. And I'm going to have to choose a dimension, cut it to that thickness, and then join them together to make a continuous board. Now I'm not going to want to just use the old butt joint because that will offer me no structural integrity whatsoever. Now one thing working to my advantage here is, I mentioned structural integrity. This is only a C table. It's a very small table you slide over your couch so you can set drinks on it or snacks or your laptop. So it's not like these need to be super strong. What I mean by structural integrity is, I don't want it to fall apart after a couple years because I didn't bother with any joinery. So I'm thinking I'm going to use bridle joints to join the pieces of ash together. And I'm also thinking through the bridle joints, I'm going to sink an ash dowel. Now, of course, I could just go find longer pieces of ash and, square them up. But I like the idea of taking a bunch of these pieces, putting them to good use, and I think it'll look cool in the end, honestly. You'll be able to tell they're individual pieces joined together, which is kind of a cool look. So yeah, let's get to it. Alright, so I broke all the ash down into 1.5 by 1.5 squares. I have lots of cutoffs that I am saving for other projects, and I might use some of it in this project as well. I do need to make a couple ash dowels for the joinery I will be using. So some of these pieces will probably become dowels. Anyhow, I have the dimensions I'm going for here. I want the C table to be 13 inches deep, about 25 inches tall, and about 17-ish inches wide. But the next step, before I begin assembling the ash body, is you've noticed I drew an X on each face. I want to square up, make sure these are all perfectly flat and square before I continue on to the joinery. And I will not be cutting the cherry until the body is assembled. I have a limited amount of cherry, so I don't want to cut it now before I know what the dimensions are going to be. Alright, so now I've got 8 tendons, 8 mortises, and 4 half laps to cut. So I'm going to start doing that. So the first part of these joints I'm cutting is the tenon, and luckily most of this I was able to accomplish on the table saw. So the first cuts are just establishing the height of the tenon, or length, I guess. Then for the second cuts, I whipped up this little jig to hold each tenon piece vertically, so I could just meet that first cut and trim it off, leaving the tenon behind. And then just a little bit of cleanup on each one with a chisel to make sure everything is nice and square. That was a challenge because there's so much wobble in my saw blade. And of course the next one I cut was the opposite of the tenon, the mortise, and luckily I was able to do a majority of it on the table saw as well, leaving the blade the same exact height as when I cut the tenons. And then I just cut the waste out with a coping saw, which didn't prove too bad. And then I used a combination of files and chisels to square up the inside of each mortise as well. So this is a really rudimentary way of making a dowel. I don't really have any other options. It does work. It takes a really long time, and all I did was drill a 5/16 inch hole in this mild steel bar, cut the ash close to that size, stuck it in a drill and started running it through. It produces a decent dowel, not the best. It'll be good for this project, but these aren't appearance grade by any means. Then up next, of course, is putting the joints together, which is pretty self-explanatory, really. The tenon slides into the mortise, and obviously you want to try to keep this as tight as possible. I needed a mallet to get most of mine together, and here in this picture we can get a pretty good look at how the joints came out. And here I am putting one full side together, that C shape. This was a bit challenging to film and do at the same time, so this is the only clip I have of that. And then once the glue was dry, I drilled a 5/16 inch hole and drived in one of those ash dowels I made, or a piece of ash dowel I made, to really lock that joint together. So for most of the joints on this little C table, there are no fasteners. It's all joinery. With the exception being these half-lap joints I cut for, there's one on the top and one on the bottom, and they kind of hold the two sides together. So there's only 4 screws used in this entire project. Alrighty, so the base is just about done. It's taken quite a number of hours to turn the firewood into this base. So many joints. I really bit off a big project here. I figured it'd be difficult, and I was right. Next thing I'm going to do is cut a rabbet with my router in the top for the cherry top to lay in. So here I'm just cutting the rabbet out for the cherry top. I did have to do this in multiple passes. Ash is pretty tough and it actually dulled my rabbeting router bit. And I did have to stop and sharpen it a couple times. And here I am just squaring up the corner left behind after the rabbeting bit was run through. It does leave a rounded corner and I wanted a square corner. So just a little chisel work. Then I also decided to just give everything a nice little round over with a 1/8 inch router bit as well. So here I am running all the cherry boards through my thickness planer, getting them all to the same thickness. Now obviously I cut all the larger pieces of cherry to the same size, and here I am just dialing in that thickness to make the glue up of the top a little easier and to save on sanding. And here I am gluing the top together. Yeah, gluing it all up. It's sitting on the flattest thing I have in my shop, and it's actually a curly maple top for a cabinet that I made years ago, and it actually turned out to be the wrong size. But it's coated in self-leveling epoxy, and it's the flattest thing I have. So I keep it around just for glue-ups, honestly. And here I am, using my card scraper to finish the top. Between the thickness planer and the card scraper, it leaves a finish that I would equate to probably 1,500 to 2,000 grit sandpaper. I mean, it's amazing. But the finish is actually a little sharper because the fibers of the wood are being severed. They're not being abraded. I'm a huge fan of these card scrapers. I recommend them to anybody. They're easy to sharpen. I wouldn't waste too much time watching YouTube videos on how to sharpen them. If you got a belt grinder, just set your table at 90 degrees and make a burr. That's all I do, and my card scrapers cut great. And here I am, I'm just applying some Danish oil to the top. I'm a big fan of oil finishes myself. It probably comes from my background in making knives and tool handles and stuff like that. That's really what ignited my fire with woodworking, was my knife making. So I come from the tool handle world, and I really, really, really like oil finishes. I don't like the feeling that a polyurethane or a varnish leaves behind. And Danish oil is an excellent choice for an oil finish because it dries much harder than like your linseed oil or your tung oil. It actually does harden, and you can build up a like a coated finish with it if you really want to, or you can get very close to a coated finish but still leave it feeling like an oil finish. And that's why I love Danish oil so much. It really kind of astounds me, the difference in the color in all these cherry boards. These are all the same species of wood, but the variance in color is incredible. And it's kind of cool, honestly. You don't know what you're gonna get when you're gonna cut apart firewood and use it for anything. So I actually like the variance, and eventually I imagine it'll all kind of mellow out to a similar tone. But it's very interesting to see the different colors of cherry side by side by side, you know? I like it. Perfect. Alright, that about wraps up this video. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. Me turn a bunch of firewood into this lovely sea table. This was a pretty complicated build, so I tried to show as much as I could without making the video 6 hours long. There was a lot of footage involved with this project and this video, but well worth it. I'm very proud of this project. It has its flaws, but I'm very happy with it. And I really hope you enjoyed coming along. And thanks for making it all this way if you have. Before you go, make sure you hit that like button and give me a subscribe if you want. It really helps me out. It helps me grow my channel. And I'll continue to put out wacky content like this. As always, thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you. I need a sea table.